RAM memories from DDR5 are the new standard in the PC market and promise to burst what was offered from DDR4 with spectacular features, but to what extent does DDR5 RAM perform better? Is it worth buying DDR5 over DDR4? Don't miss today's video. Why we are going to analyze all this and much more. For this we are going to test different considerations of DDR4 and DDR5 in different video games for you to see the real differences. If you want to understand how RAM works and how to choose the best option for you in that case, after watching this video, you can head over to watch this other video which is much more detailed and in-depth without fail. If you do not want to miss any detail, this video series belongs to the series Build Your Gaming PC Edition 2, so do not miss all the episodes to understand everything about each of the components of a PC. I hope this video is what you were looking for, and I wanted to emphasize that it has been possible thanks to your support. If you want to see more videos like this on the channel, it is vital that you subscribe, since the vast majority who watch the videos are not subscribed, and bring relevant content is very complicated if our community does not grow in numbers. See also the description to follow us on the other networks like TikTok or Instagram, and especially in our Amazon affiliate links to your bookmarks. That way, despite paying the same price for your online purchases, you will be contributing directly to this channel. I must say that DDR5 modules are still in constant evolution, and we are far away from the numbers that manufacturers are going to reach, both in frequencies and latencies. But still, I think it's a good idea to compare the performance difference between DDR5 modules and DDR4 modules. Who knows, maybe the jump is so huge that it is worth upgrading to DDR5 today. In this case, as we did with DDR4, we will test 16 gigs in single and dual channel and 32 gigs in dual channel. These are the most interesting DDR5 combinations for gaming, the ones you should consider for your PC. All these configurations will be compared at 4800 MHz and 6000 MHz to see how the frequencies affect DDR5. Finally, we compare DDR4 RAM with DDR5 to determine which is the best value for money alternative today. First, as I said, let's study the amount of RAM needed and the effect of dual channel. Let's start with Fortnite and see the results. The truth is that they are super surprising. The truth is that it could not look less like DDR4. As you can see, the average FPS is almost the same, and we have 82 frames per second on average for the 16 gigs in single channel, 81 frames per second is for the dual channel combination, and 83 frames per second for the 32 gigs. The minimum FPS also remains very constant, something that in DDR4 we did see that there was more difference, although it is seen that the 32 gigs do get a much higher minimum. The truth is that this result could be due to someone's specific gameplay, and the truth is that I do not think it is so representative. In the end, seeing the average, we can say that at least in Fortnite, having dual channel or single channel when we are talking about DDR5 RAM does not affect anything. But before giving this result as the only valid one, let's also test the integrated benchmark of Cyberpunk 2077. Here again the differences are much smaller. Regarding what we have seen in DDR4, the winning option would be the 16 gigs in dual channel in this case, and we would have an average of 70 frames per second, but the rest would be very close because of the 67 frames per second we would have in the 16 gigs in dual channel, and the 68 frames per second of the 32 gigs. The truth is that everything is much more even than expected, and it is also verified in the next benchmark, which is in Battlefield 5, where we continue to have super similar results. Again, at the combination of DDR5 dual channel, 16 gigs of RAM, 75 FPS on average with a minimum of 59, but the other configurations with the 16 as the 32 are at 72 on average with 57 minimum, so it is super even as well. But let's see here if there is any difference raising the RAM frequencies to 6000 MHz, how much are we gaining with this increase? Well, if we start with Fortnite keeping the same settings, only raising the RAM frequency, we see how the averages and minimums are still very much like when the RAM is down, reaching 4800 MHz. In all of them we raise a little bit, we raise 1 or 2 FPS, and the minimums are also a little better, but in reality the real difference is practically imperceptible. So at least in Fortnite the increase to 6000 MHz with respect to the 4800 is not noticeable. Then comes Cyberpunk 2077, and the truth is that the result is more or less the same, with averages and minimums that are practically the same. So again, the increase to 6000 MHz is hardly noticeable. Finally, in Battlefield 5 here, if we want a result a little different from what we were seeing, the 16 gigs of RAM in single channel, the truth is that they have given surprisingly low result, very similar, practically on par with what we had seen at 4800 MHz. But the rest of the configurations do show a slightly higher increase. And here the dual channel configurations stand out a little bit, jumping to 78 frames per second on average with a minimum of 63 for the dual channel configuration in 16 GB and jumping to 77 on average for the 32 GB. Once again, the difference in gameplay is minimal. In the end, each configuration is played 15 minutes and we have taken the average of that 15-minute gameplay, so in the end everything is very much equal. Taking this into account, we can see that in Battlefield 5 having dual channel could give you a little bit of extra performance. Seeing that this has only happened in Battlefield 5, the truth is that in many other games will still not matter too much the fact of having dual channel or the extra RAM frequencies, but the truth is that it has always yielded a little more this extra frequency, because as I said before, having more frequency will give you more performance as long as the PC is maintained stable. With these results we see how with the DDR5 RAM the frequencies do not end up mattering too much and do not give too much extra performance in most cases. In this case, moreover, I find it extremely remarkable that the single channel does not work badly at all. In fact, it is very close to dual channel in tests with 16 GB of RAM. But let's see then what are the differences between DDR4 and DDR5. Which one performs better? Is it worth the price premium? Well, again, let's start with Fortnite and we're going to compare all three different DDR4 combinations at 3200 MHz with the three DDR5 configurations at 6000 MHz. So basically we would be comparing the best of DDR4 with the best from DDR5. Here the difference becomes very visible, especially when we have single channel. Since DDR5 single channel we have already seen that it works very well, and the difference with DDR4 becomes quite significant. The rest of the combinations, both with 16 and 32 GB. The truth is that there is still a difference of 5 or 6 FPS or so, but it is much less noticeable. And if we were not comparing it like that, in the end the truth is that having 77 frames per second than having 83 frames per second will not be too noticeable, taking into account, moreover, that the minimums are exactly the same. We now move on to Cyberpunk and the results are quite similar. Again, DDR4 in single channel we see that it works quite poorly to be honest, and the minimums are also much worse compared to DDR5, the rest of configurations. Once we have dual channel, the truth is that everything is very much equal again, and the differences of 4 FPS is on average. The truth is that they are not too remarkable in the end. Keep in mind that the cheaper version of the RTX 3060 compared to the more expensive and more overclocked version of a RTX 3060 can already be giving you those 4 FPS difference. And with this I want to say that it will always be good to have 4 extra FPS than to have 4 FPS less, but that the difference is not so noticeable and other components could also alter it. Some may have missed the GTA 5 the integrated benchmark. But I'm not going to lie, I forgot to test with DDR5 RAM and the GTA benchmark, so we have been left without that comparison. In the end we have seen how DDR5 RAM does perform better in games with improvements of around 5 to 10–15% in our tests depending on the configuration. Note that it could change depending on the components of your PC and the game tested. So these differences are more or less indicative. It is worth taking the leap, because the lower ranges and in PCS from less than €1,000. I would say that not from €1,500 in fish that mount components of last generation, the DDR5 would be giving you some performance with what you could consider it, although a lot. Here a PC with DDR5 will cost you much more than a PC with DDR4 RAM. A combo of 16 gigs of RAM and motherboard of the intermediate chipset will cost you about €150 approximately the DDR4, and with DDR5 we could be talking about €300 easily. Those €150 of difference could be invested in a higher-end graphics card, and possibly the improvement obtained thanks to that better graphics card would be superior to the improvement that the RAM is giving you. It is simply a note that I think it is important for you to keep in mind. This is why I say that DDR5 RAM can be worthwhile, but almost only at the high end.